Hello Yu-Gi-Oh players and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJBZR. Today, I'm making mac and cheese. Also, I will be talking to you guys about Chain Beat, because I love Chain Beat. Specifically, some new cards that Chain Beat can actually see playing in the current format as of this month. These are a few really interesting cards that haven't really been quite as relevant to the deck in the past. Mostly because the game's been too fast and has involved too many resources, too many unlimited resources in decks like Dragon Rulers, things like, well, you guys know. Last format, Chain Beat was not having a lot of fun, and now that the new format is coming in, it is also offering a couple of new opportunities to Chain Beat in the form of a few cards. Now these cards also produce their own chain theory that I'm going to have to discuss in order for any of this to make sense. So the first one I want to talk about is Pineapple Blast. This is just a silly little card that I've been theorying around with some of my friends. No, I do not talk to cards. Actually, that's kind of a lie. I've been known to get very angry at my cards during duels. Anyway, I've been talking to my friends about Pineapple Blast, and what Pineapple Blast does is it says you can. It's a trap card. And it says that you can only activate it when you normal summon a monster. And when you do, if your opponent has more monsters on the field than you do, your opponent selects and destroys monsters equal to the difference until, not just equal to the difference, but until they have the same number of monsters on the field as you. This is an important distinction because the way that this particular piece of theory works is you normal summon. It doesn't really matter how many chainable monsters you have on the field, as long as your only monsters that you start with are chainable. You normal summon a chainable monster, you activate Pineapple Blast, and you chain all of the chainable monsters that you currently control. So what happens then is so you can activate the Pineapple Blast successfully, and then when it resolves, it reads the number of monsters that you have on the field, and the number of monsters that you have on the field will be 0. So your opponent will have to select themselves and destroy all of the monsters they currently control. Now this seems like a great idea. The only problem with it is that it's kind of slow. You have to wait until your turn in order to activate it. It only works when you normal summon it, but it does kind of act as a second dark hole, if you will. It's definitely something to consider. There's a lot of new rulings that have to come about that I have to make some sense of before I can actually start using that card effectively, but it is something to think about. The next card is actually something much more usable and much more adaptable to Chain Beat. And this is one of my favorite texts. It was actually pointed out to me by one of my subscribers. I thought it was very interesting. And that card is Widespread Dud. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I play in a meta with a large number of Harpy players. Harpies are very popular in my area. And what Widespread Dud is, besides a Harpy killer, is a continuous trap card that says when this card is activated, target 2 monsters that are in face-up attack position on either side of the field. When one of those monsters is removed from the field, destroy this card. When this card is destroyed, destroy all face-up targets still left on the board. So what you can do, aside from allowing your opponent to blind MST into it, which is always entertaining, or for a Harpy player to hunting ground into it, which is even more fun, is, during your opponent's turn, if they have a monster that you can't get rid of, if it's by, I don't know, if they have too many monsters for an effective compulsory escape device, for instance, or if you just don't have the available resources to get rid of a problem monster on your opponent's side of the field, what you can do is you can activate the what do they call it? The Widespread Dud, that's what it is. Target one of your chainable monsters, and then target your opponent's attack position monster you're having issues getting rid of. Then you activate your chainable monster's effect, sending it back to the void from whence it came, also known as banishing it, and then it will leave the field, meaning that Widespread Dud will read that it is gone and destroy itself, and also destroy the monster you selected on your opponent's side of the field. Now this creates an interesting bit of chain theory that's a little bit problematic, which is that if you activate the Widespread Dud and then chain the Chainable Monsters effect, to banish itself, the Widespread Dud will then not read the fact that you targeted that monster and when it resolves, and will not activate its effect. Which means you only have one target, which basically makes it useless unless you MST, at which point it becomes a minus. So what you want to do here is preferably you would target a rabbit, since rabbit can ignite its own effect. Ignite, that's kind of a cool word to use that. It can start its own effect without any chain happening. And then you activate the rabbit when your Widespread Dud is face down, then you chain the Widespread Dud. So the Widespread Dud then has to resolve first, and then rabbit will leave the field, creating Widespread Dud's effect. A fun thing about Widespread Dud is its first effect does not destroy something, so your opponent cannot Stardust it. They cannot do whatever the things they do that negate cards, that destroy cards. And then, when its effect to leave the field and destroy both monsters happens, that doesn't actually start a chain. So your opponent's Stardust cannot activate in response to that either. It's kind of like how you can't warning an Infernity Launcher, which is one of the dumber rulers in the world. So Widespread Dud is a really cool card. If you're in a really desperate situation, you can take out two of your opponent's monsters by MSTing it yourself. There are just a lot of ways that you can abuse that card and mess around with it in a chain beat deck. Another way that you can do it is you can target one of your Rose tokens when your opponent attacks it, and then you can target one of their monsters, the Rose token will disappear, Widespread Dud will activate and kill the monster that your opponent controls. Another one of these texts, or cards to think about for this format, is Necrovalley. Now Necrovalley was something that was kind of usable in the past, but it hasn't made a huge difference to the deck before. But now we have Boojins, which we basically couldn't imagine having in the past. And Boojins are actually hurt quite a bit by Necrovalley, especially when you are playing a deck like Chain Beat, which can use both Necrovalley, it can use Light Imprisoning Mirror, and it can also use DNA Surgery. So Necrovalley against Boojins is arguably a much better choice than Black Garden. Because the thing about Black Garden and Boojins is they don't really give a damn about it. Unless you have DNA Surgery on the field, or you debunk their Crane, it's unlikely that the Black Garden is going to continue to have their Yamatos attack for very long, or their Mikazuchis or whatever. But Necrovalley hurts them over a long period of time and makes them very vulnerable to the effects of your compulsory escape devices, of your mirror forces, your deep prisons, your Widespread Duds, etc., because your opponent can't banish monsters from the graveyard. And what this does is it opens you up to using your DNA surgeries. And the thing about that is that, first off, your opponent will have to use an MST on the Necrovalley, unless they're using Black Garden, in which case, great, you don't give a damn about Black Garden anyway, so you are absolutely A-okay. So if they use an MST on your Necrovalley, that means they're not using an MST on your DNA surgery. And this is a really good thing. This is actually a lot of the theory behind why people used to run Shard of Greed, was because the Shard of Greed would distract from the important cards. And that's kind of the thing about Necrovalley in this deck. So if you have the Necrovalley backed up by the DNA surgery or backed up by the debunk, you're in an extremely good position in Chain Beat, and since you don't special summon from the graveyard, you don't do anything really with the graveyard at all, it has no downfall for you. Let's see, I know that there was another one and I'm not thinking about it. Black Horn of Heaven is a good example. A lot of Chain Beat players are starting to take out Vanity's Emptiness and put it into the side deck because Black Horn of Heaven is ending up a much better choice, because what are some of the top decks right now? Well, Mermails are big, and Vanity's Emptiness is good for that, but they have a lot of outs for it, so there are much better things you could run, like Abyss Dweller, Soul Drain, Macro, D-Fissure. But aside from Mermails, and I suppose 3-Axis Fire Fist, really, there is nothing that, that Vanity's Emptiness can do for you that Black Horn of Heaven can't. because if you're playing against a deck like, let's say, Constellars, which is one of the big decks this format, you can activate that Vanity's Emptiness. Your opponent's just going to wait to overlay until they destroy one of your monsters, or until they can MST your back row. Constellars can survive without Xyz summoning for a while. They have a lot of outs for Vanity's Emptiness as well. But against a Black Horn of Heaven, if they use up their resources to go into that Pleiades, then you can just Black Horn of Heaven the Pleiades. They probably won't have a response. You can't trap stun in response to the Black Horn of Heaven, so they're in pretty deep shit. So those are some interesting tech cards to start playing in Chain Beat, and a little bit of chain theory surrounding them. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why. And then comment, rate, and whoa, I almost did comment, rate, subscribe. That is a big no-no on my channel. And then subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks discussion, analysis, and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans. Meanwhile, thank you guys for watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Business Casual. I am your host, the RJB0, and I've got some macaroni and cheese to eat. See ya.